Okay, we are going live in 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the first session of today's Indigenous Alumni Living Library. My name is Ruth Shedd. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Communications for the Office of the Vice President Indigenous at the University of Manitoba. Today, you have access to some incredible books. 4 influential Indigenous alumni are joining us to share their stories and answer your questions. This is both an opportunity for us to honor the important work and contributions of today's guests and to connect learners with those who are leading the way in their fields. This being a virtual event, I ask that you acknowledge the territory where you are participating from. I'm taking part in Winnipeg, which comes from a Cree word meaning murky or muddy waters. This is Treaty 1 territory and the birthplace of the Métis Nation. I also want to acknowledge that the drinking water that we access here in Winnipeg comes from Shoal Lake 40, and I want to acknowledge our dependence on and responsibility to protect all of the land and water. So today we have invited students who are currently studying in the faculties that the books graduated from to be our hosts. But before I ask this session's student host to take over, I'd like to introduce Dr. Catherine Cook. Dr. Cook is the U of M's first Vice President Indigenous. She is also an alumna with degrees in science and medicine, and she joins us now to share a few words.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and to hear from our distinguished alumna. It's really fascinating to me that this is a time for you that can be both stressful and exciting. You're learning things that you've wanted to learn for a long time, but the pressure of exams and all of the rest of it make it a little bit less exciting than it would normally have been. And I commend all of you for the work that you're doing and keeping up with your studies and keeping your forward movement in this time of COVID and remote learning. I know that that's very challenging. And you know, we wish you well in all of that. I think for both undergraduate and graduate students, you probably came in with maybe a very strong goal, maybe a clear vision of where you wanted to be in 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 years, depending on if you're undergrad or graduate. And you're probably now really looking forward to where you want to be on your career path. One of the things I've learned is that the career that I had my sights set on when I was completing my degree in medicine is not at all what I'm doing today. And that's okay. Opportunities come along. You see ways that you can serve your community in a different way. You see opportunities that excite you and you're able to move forward. So I think that where we are today is a really critical step. Hearing from our living library and their opportunities, their experiences, I hope will give you hope and some excitement for the future that this is but the first step in your journey, and you will meet exciting people that will influence you. You will meet other students, you will form friendships that will be with you forever, and really enjoy this time. And in 5, 10, 15 years, we look forward to seeing you here, telling your story and the little turns in the road that happened that you maybe weren't expecting, but helped you to accomplish a career goal that was even better than you had set your sights on in your undergraduate years. So enjoy today, hearing these wonderful stories, take inspiration from them, and be excited for your future. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the day.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Okay, so this is the exciting part. So everyone who has joined by Zoom, I'm just going to ask that you keep your mics on mute unless you have put up your hand and the host today has called on you to ask your question. This is a very interactive session, so please ask questions. That's why our books are here, to answer your questions. You can leave a question in the chat section if you're joining us on Zoom, Or if you're joining us on Facebook, you can leave a question in the comments, and we will be monitoring those questions as well and make sure that they get to our book today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Nicole Luke. She is an Inuk student who is in her second and final year of the master's program in the Faculty of Architecture, and she is going to introduce our first book.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. All right, I will introduce Ryan Gorrie. So Ryan Gorrie is a member of the Bingwi Niyashi Anishinaabeg Sandpoint First Nation on Lake Nipigon. He graduated from architecture in 2009 and from the University of Manitoba, and Ryan has been collaborating with Brooke McElroy since 2009. When he was retained as a key member of the design team for the award-winning Spirit Garden in Thunder Bay, and he formally joined the firm in 2016 to lead the Indigenous design studio. So Ryan, could you start off with telling us a little bit about yourself and where you come from?
Bonjour, everyone. Good morning. Migazeb Danjiganes and Dijnakas, Ajak and Dodem, Nimiki Wikadong and Donji, and Danokioma, Winnipeg. Yeah, so I'm originally from Thunder Bay and grew up there. I moved to Winnipeg in '99 to go to university, and was really interested in, at first I was coming to university to study engineering was the first thing, and that quickly fell away, and I ended up following the art path. And really growing up in a smaller town, there wasn't really I didn't really even have university on the radar at all. Especially given that Ontario is a grade 13 requirement. I was, I struggled in high school, got into things that kids do, and but moving to Manitoba gave me that opportunity to open up the possibility to go to university. So I studied fine arts and I studied architecture at U of M.
That's great. Why did you feel like you wanted to tell your story here today?
Well, the university has always been a really big part of my life, spending so much time there, meeting so many people, and, having the opportunity to share, my story. It's funny to be considered as a book. I more consider myself as a series of small pamphlets. But giving back in whatever way that I can, so having that opportunity is something that, I'm grateful for in sharing my story. So, and I hope that others will be able to take something from what I'm sharing, and to know that, we're all on our own paths, but there's many similarities that we share as Indigenous people, shared histories, shared stories, and we certainly can benefit from that.
That's great. And what was the most memorable thing about your first year of university?
Oh boy. I think there's a lot. And I did get these questions before, and it really caused me to think back and reflect, like, so long ago. I think it was really the whole new experience of being in this space I had never been in before, surrounded by people, Indigenous people, people who were tremendous supports, meeting all these new faces, and, the diversity of experiences that people had. Because I went through the access programs, we had we had our own little group, and that supported each other. And it was really, it's foundational, but also really, really key, I think, to my success was having that support network. So yeah, definitely connecting with the people. Of course, meeting my wife back then, in the year 2000, we were going to university together. And so now it's, fast forward 20 20 plus years, and still going strong. So lots of memories, lots of, so it's all memorable, I guess you could say.
That's great. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to put your hands up or anything in the chat. But for now, I will ask one more question. Do you have any defining moments, either throughout your education or throughout your career, that really resonate with you? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of moments, and you know, it might come up in other questions, but certainly the connection to culture and language has been defining for me. You know, having grown up with very little knowledge of what it is to be Anishinaabe, you know, there was very little language, very little community. So, you know, going to my first ceremony with my mom, actually, who was a student at U of M. So she's really the one who encouraged me to come to university. She was a mature student taking Native studies, and you know, she kind of ushered me along to move out to Winnipeg and go to university. So and then also, you know, she was really the one that spearheaded the cultural kind of revival in our family. So I was kind of following her lead on that, and you know, so she really introduced me to university and culture. And so it was definitely a primary foundational moment was to engage, to start that journey of reclamation. And you know, it was, you know, I think there's other defining moments in terms of you know, really taking that next step after a bachelor's degree. I didn't really know what I was going to be doing after fine arts, but you know, having the support of people who are mentors along the way really helped to you know, push me along in another direction. You know, I was kind of just, well, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but being able to meet with others, like Dave Thomas at the Faculty of Architecture, who is doing his undergrad, and you know, being able to see the work that was being done, I could see myself there. I could see the natural extension of fine arts and what I was doing, and so I think that was really a defining moment as well. Yeah, I mean, there are other moments that were not so, I guess, positive in terms of, but were certainly defining. You know, starting my first year in architecture, my mother passed away suddenly, and an elder that I was close to and charter also passed away in the same year. So it was kind of like a double whammy being hit. And you know, how that defined me going into architecture was, you know, there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of self-doubt, there was, you know, a kind of, you know, wanting to go inside and not really, I guess, not really being fully engaged in the education. There was really a distilling for me, like what was really important. And I kind of stuck to those things. So, you know, sticking close to family, you know, diving into culture, diving into ceremony to be, to really help me along in those times. So another, you know, really big defining moment.
So I guess you went over a little bit about going into architecture, but is there any certain moment or day that you kind of remember where you decided that you're going to apply into the Faculty of Architecture and pursue it?
Oh yeah, I guess there was probably a couple, but I was sitting at the Aboriginal Student Center when it was in University Center, and a woman walked in, and she was studying architecture, and she was asking a question about connecting with people and cultures, and I kind of piped up and started chatting with her, and she said, well, what are you doing? And I said, I'm in fine arts and I don't know what I'm doing next. And so she says, well, you should come and meet the dean of architecture. He's really interested in, you know, bringing more Indigenous people in, of supporting Indigenous students' success. And certainly it was that meeting that helped me to see that there was a place for me there, that it was supported from the highest level. And I think that helped to kind of kickstart a more serious approach to applying to architecture. I did actually study undergrad. I took the intro to environmental design, and I did terribly before that. So I think that's why I kind of shied away for a while, but ended up coming back.
And what has been your biggest motivator?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's the idea that design is incredibly open, and you know, that we can express ourselves, our culture, our ideas, our worldviews in a multitude of ways, that there's an incredible foundation to support that work. So it's kind of, and it's an evolving process, you know, just like reclamation personally, you know, I'll never get to the point where I can, you know, fully reclaim, but it's the journey, it's the path that we set ourselves on. So, you know, running parallel with the work that we do, you know, it's building on to that cultural, that knowledge piece, and weaving that back into the work. So
I think that's something most Indigenous designers kind of feel as well. At least that's how I agree. And Leah has asked, are there any historical forms of Indigenous architecture that your practice is inspired by?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, not only, you know, the wigwam, you know, the teepee-like structures, you know, many nations had teepee-like structures, but also in the way that we build, you know, the bent wood, the use of materiality, the lapping of, let's say, bark on a lodge. So, but I also, you know, try to think about architecture and design in a way that how do we relate to materials now? You know, before it was much more local, but you know, often our buildings are put together from materials that come from elsewhere, but still trying to maintain that idea of ways of building, the spatial qualities of our traditional structures, you know, which we still build today in the same way that they are built, you know, hundreds or thousands of years ago. So there's something in that continuity that's really inspiring. Yeah. So I think we always return to those original forms because of the long-standing use and tradition related, you know, in the sense that create, you know, there's true Indigenous space in those structures.
I think that transitions nicely into our next question, which is, what are some of the ways you've noticed Indigenous culture informs the world of architecture?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a broad question. You know, I think you see a range from sort of applied motifs to you know, fully formed buildings which reflect Indigenous culture, like you know, like Migiziagamik at the university, which is different from everything else around it as a building. But we're also seeing, you know, post TRC, we see a lot of proposal calls calling for Indigenous design. And some of those proposal calls are really in depth, and some of them are pretty surface level. But, you know, I think the ideas around indigenization, the ideas around reconciliation are really starting to pull the desire for Indigenous design within projects. You know, and in some cases it fits really well. In other cases, it's a bit of a shoehorning in. But, you know, in so many ways, our role as Indigenous designers is to advocate as much for inclusivity and meaningful space within those projects. Had the opportunity to travel to New Zealand to see the work of the Maori people and to see how they are influencing the built environment, and, you know, feeling like there's a really strong contingent of designers that we met there who are really shaping those conversations. There's a lot of similarities, you know, with colonization, and, you know, to see how they are sort of weaving their histories back into cities like Christchurch, which was hit by the earthquake. You know, this kind of this chance to restart and reclaim Maori identities. So I think it's been really a really interesting few years in that regard, with being able to see this kind of international scale and local scale, and the kind of building on this momentum that we're feeling here in Canada with our Indigenous designers and architects.
So what are the projects that you've worked on that you are the most proud of?
Well, I guess, you know, the Spirit Garden was one of my very first projects. So I think I'm really proud of that, because it really helped to propel my design ideas to have something that was, you know, something built kind of early on in my career that I helped to form in a really meaningful way. So the gathering structure, the Spirit Garden, you know, the Thunder Bay waterfront, and having an impact on the city where I didn't otherwise have any sense of culture. So it's kind of like a reclaiming space in a sense for me. You know, the waterfront itself was pretty stark. When I grew up there, it was, you know, private boat slips, some walking paths, as the old train station, parking facilities, and now it's been, you know, sort of transformed into a destination, and it's still going. You know, we're looking forward to the Thunder Bay Art Gallery, which will be placed at the waterfront right near the Spirit Garden. So there's this incredible momentum in Thunder Bay, and you know, just the feedback getting from that project, you know, seeing how it was used, you know, you know, at the height of Idle No More, it was used for protests. People have sent me, you know, their wedding photos from the Spirit Garden, and, you know, people, First Nations schools have used it for graduation. So it's been certainly one of my first projects, and one of the projects I'm most proud of, because we also had, you know, it was also built by a First Nations craftsman. We had Indigenous people providing the planting. So there was Indigenous people doing the consultation, and it was a way for me to connect with community in a way I had never before, and to have, you know, it kind of, you know, to have people from the community who said, you know, I know you, I know your family, or, you know, I'm really glad to have met you, and, you know, this is really important work, and to have that kind of encouragement. So yeah, that was kind of a long answer to that question, but.
speaking of feedback from the project, Samantha Martin-Bird from Thunder Bay is joining us right now, and she says that she also loves the Spirit Garden.
Oh, cool.
So moving forward, in terms of your education, who is your favorite professor or instructor, or if there is a few, who are they and why?
Oh boy. Well, when I was in video in fine arts, Alex Parizhnik, who is not there anymore, but he was certainly one of my favorite professors, very encouraging, very supportive, and had a really great way of just letting you explore what you wanted to do. When I was in master's, certainly Nada Sabotincic, who is also no longer at the university, but she was also very supportive and very also challenged you. There was always this desire for us to build on what we thought was important, what we thought was material to our lives, and being challenged to dig deep. So Nada and Mark West as well. So there was. It's too bad that they're no longer at the university. I would love to have a coffee with them at some point, but they're in Montreal now, I think.
So Ruth has asked, what advice do you have for young people considering going into architecture?
I would say if you love drawing, if you love making, if you don't see yourself reflected in what you see built, if you are interested in designing furniture, if you're interested in designing logos, if you're interested in designing really anything, I mean, architecture gives you a really great skill set that is expandable into many different professions. So whether you actually become an architect or whether you're a designer for like I said, for furniture, or whether you're interested in construction, or whether you're interested in project management, there are many aspects. Or if you want to teach architecture and design, there's so many avenues. It opens up many doors. We do a lot of writing, we do a lot of speaking, we do a lot of presentations to community, but there's niches you can find within architecture. So whether you're drawn to more technical drawing or interested in developing and research, there's many avenues. It's not becoming an architect is not a short path per se. We end up doing a 3 to 4 year internship after we graduate to gain the experience that we need to write our exams, but all the while building on our skills and development. But I started with just drawing. That's where that's my origins. And when I was a young kid, growing up in Thunder Bay, some of the tools that I got that were, I guess maybe propelled, all architects are like, well, I used to, build Lego or build forts or, find their origins. Mine was definitely in drawing. There was a man who lived in our apartment building, who worked at the paper mill, and he used to bring me stacks of paper. And then one time he brought a big roll of paper. And so my mom had bought me a drafting or a drawing table. I think I was about 6 or 7 years old. And, that was my go-to. So rip off a sheet of paper and just drawing whatever, hockey logos or, characters or whatever. So if you love to draw, if you love to make things, yeah, go for it. I mean, even fashion, even all the design disciplines.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's as creative as you want it to be, I find. So we have another question from Facebook, and it is, how can architecture be environmentally responsible?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, buildings and construction are big polluters, contribute to the carbon footprint in a major way. Many projects are try to lean towards locally sourced materials, within a certain radius of the project's origin. It's been on my mind that we should try to preserve the kind of bones of buildings that we have, and renovations can be a really great way to save on materiality, to save on construction waste in terms of new builds. So I mean, that's one way, but certainly really sussing out programmatic, like how much space do you really need, or because really it's the footprint of these buildings that are the drivers of how much material you use, and trying to utilize passive strategies like bringing in natural light, using the sun, whether that's using photovoltaic panels or whether it's using heat sinks where you're absorbing sunlight, utilizing geothermal technologies and green technologies where possible, but really considering how we can reuse buildings that we have, I think is one way. And there's this, I was challenged by our friend in Norway, Yor Nango, who's a Sami architect, and he brought up this question of ungrowth. There's this idea that the more we build, the more we're growing. This is progress. Not trying to talk myself out of a job or anything, but it really is it's been on my mind ever since. That are we making things better? Or are we making things worse? And if we're making things worse, how do we do better? So, there's strategies there, but we, I guess, digging into it more in a more meaningful way, and trying to find ways of building. Whether the big push nowadays is using mass timber, so using sustainably harvested wood to create large timber structures is kind of the way to reduce carbon. So there's several ways, but there's lots of work to do in the profession.
And so as a student, what supports did you find that were the most helpful?
Yeah, the Aboriginal Student Center and the Access programs were my home. I spent so much of my downtime at the Student Center, not only just, being in the lounge, hanging out, but also I worked there. I did some sort of part-time work. And, it was really the people. So, I have a list of names that's quite long that, that, when I started, there was Bruce Miller, Carl Stone, Kaylee Storm, Adrian Carrier, all the people at the Access programs at the time, Brenda Lafreniere, Lina Hart, and obviously all the students that I connected with were really great supports as well. As well as having a partner like Tara who's also going through the same thing. Where we were going to university, doing our undergrads together and our degrees, and even took one class together. But certainly all the people at the university. And you know, mentorship is an incredible piece that I can't emphasize enough. You know, finding those people who are going through what you're going through, and whether it's an informal mentorship or whether it's a formal mentorship, it was critical to my pathway, both academically and culturally. You know, having elders that I could turn to help to deal with the things I was going through, you know, culturally, but also, you know, personal healing from, you know, life's traumas. So definitely the people that were at the university were really helpful. And, you know, there's a network there. That's what was really key too, is being able to connect with people there, but also they had their own network. So you have access to so much more just by talking and meeting with people. So it was great. And, you know, the Student Center really facilitated that, and the Access Student Center. So it's nice to have one building now where everything is contained. And yeah.
Is there any advice you can give to students trying to find a job after graduation?
Well, I think in architecture, there's a big need for, I think, our voices in architecture. So I don't see a problem for Indigenous graduates finding work, to be honest. But you can correct me if I'm wrong. And I would say, you know, be honest about what you want to get out of the work. And, you know, finding places that are supportive of what you want to do is ideal. Sometimes we don't always get that. Sometimes we take, you know, we have to take the work that's there. But, you know, do your research and find the places that you think will help you, not only professionally, but, you know, also support you culturally, and ask for it, because I feel like it's the responsibility of firms to do that, to help to support Indigenous reclamation. And, you know, because they are, you know, we're all kind of, you know, because there's this idea that we're, you know, we're benefiting from each other. And, you know, it's a reciprocal relationship between the employer and the employee. So, and yeah, recognize your voice. You have a voice, and use it. Use it to advocate for yourself. Yeah, and, you know, you can find that mentorship in our other Indigenous architects too. There's a big support there across Canada. There's like 20 or 25 Indigenous architects in Canada, but we all kind of know each other, and there's a network there. So reach out, and there's a place where you can go.
So Marla has asked, I think back to the process of creating Migizi Agmic, and it included the engagement of community and elders. Can you tell us about your experience working with community and elders, and how that has impacted, focused, or developed your work and design aesthetic?
Yeah, I think it's, I'm just trying to think back to projects. So, for example, the Spirit Garden brought together community and elders from the Robinson Superior Treaty area. And, you know, in working on projects, especially on the municipal level, there are fissures or cracks that you observe, you know, because communities are asked to engage and offer their knowledge. But there have been, you know, historical injustices within those communities. So, you know, really recognizing people's histories with, you know, with municipalities, with Canada in general, I think is a key component to realize that we're, communities are all at different levels, and acknowledging those spaces, those levels. But elders and community members at the Spirit Garden were very supportive, but they're also challenging. While they recognized and saw someone they could relate to, they also recognized someone who in me that they could challenge and say, you have a responsibility here. You're representing us, you're representing the community and the design, and you're carrying that vision forward. So I think it instantly introduces a sense of humility in the work that you do, to realize that you are carrying that. And also, there's also a lot of pride in working with communities to helping them see their vision. So time and time again, having people come up and say, we're really proud of the work that you're doing, and very excited that there are Indigenous architects out there, and meeting with the community, and offering my experiences, offering that, while not having maybe a direct connection to community, offering that shared history perspective really helps us to start out in a, not on a ground zero footing. So I think carrying in every project that we've worked with community, elders, youth, really taking those lessons and applying them in future projects as well. Like, making sure you have protocols in place for when you are beginning projects. So, offering to, I don't forget my smudge bowl when I go to community. If there's not, something there that, they have, then I have it with me, whether that's an institution or whether it's a community, realizing that these protocols are important for starting projects. So, and it's been a range of those initiation parts and projects, from actually, from having a pipe ceremony to having just a smudge, to going to a sweat ceremony, to having a sharing circle. So really, observing the local protocols and helping out where you can in those, to facilitate and to help others understand the importance of those pieces.
So if there was one building or space in Winnipeg that you could redo, what is it and why would you do it?
Oh boy. Hey, that wasn't on the list. Just kidding. Oh, that's a good question. I'm gonna get myself into trouble probably. I think I think there's a lot of, like almost every building is a colonial construct in a sense, in a lot of our cities. And I think the way that we could, well, I keep thinking about the legislature, because it's like the seat of power. It's the, it's the representation of that colonial center. So could we redo it? Maybe, I don't know, but to say that, could that space be more reflective of the people here? And, kind of in the same way that, could Parliament be in Ottawa be more reflective? And I know, Nicole, you were involved in a project working on the Indigenous space opposite Parliament. But I really think our major institutions like government should be more reflective. How, I don't know, but certainly we don't see ourselves there. So I know it kind of didn't really answer your question, but it kind of did.
It gives us a bit of an insight. So what has been your biggest obstacle, either through schooling or through your career?
Oh boy, I guess it's been myself. There's not really, I guess, having the confidence to do what I do, and it's a long road, and it continues to be a long road to really trust that what I'm doing is the right thing. So definitely myself, being my toughest critic. I think we often all are. So yeah, definitely. But getting better.
So Leah has asked, she has two questions. So the first question is, who are some of your favorite designers right now?
I guess I point towards some of our Indigenous designers. I really like, in Canada, I really like the work of Alfred Waugh, who is a Dene architect based in BC, or is he based in Yellowknife? I can't remember, but he's, if you want to talk about sustainability, he's really pushed the envelope for sustainable design and really reflected it within Indigenous culture. So Alfred definitely is on my list. And I really like the work of Chris Cornelius out of Wisconsin, from the Oneida Nation. Really interesting work, beautiful drawings, and the ideas of how he translates Indigenous knowledge into Indigenous spaces is just fantastic. So those two designers.
And then the second question is, do you have your own personal art practice outside of work, and what are you working on right now?
I do. It's a very long process. So I make drawings using smoke. And so I've been off and on over the years working on pieces here and there. But I also do carving, stone carving and wood carving, sometimes make furniture, sometimes do leather work. Haven't done beadwork in a long time. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I made some moccasins for my daughter. But I'm all over the place. Like, I have a lot of interests. So, but mostly in the drawing, I guess, right now.
So you mentioned that your biggest obstacle is yourself, but through that, like, what has been the most rewarding experience that you've had?
Well, I guess I'm thinking back to school, and in my final year of thesis, I kind of went inside again and stepped away from the studio and started working at home. When you're in your thesis, you are really more on an independent path, and being able to pull out the drawing style sort of tucked away in in the research that I was doing in this sort of historical ways. So as I mentioned, doing smoke drawings, drawing on our traditional use of smoke as a preservative for clothing, for food, and really finding that art form or uncovering it. And so finding that unique piece, I guess, within the work, whether, it wasn't the project in the end of that thesis that I was sort of, that was the best thing. It was actually the process and the drawing that came out of that that was like, I guess it was transformative for me. It was like reclaiming. It was finding that thread and kind of bringing it forward that was really impactful.
Lost my spot here. Tell us one thing that you wish you knew then, maybe when you were a student, and then one thing that you know for sure now.
That's a good one. I guess being grateful for what I have. You know, there was a lot of things taken for granted, I think. But certainly having the gratitude to see the connection in all things, to realize that what we do is supported by a network of people, that we're not really alone. And when you realize that, I think you can have more confidence in what you're doing, and you can have a greater appreciation for the time that you have, just generally.
Was there anything special that you did for good luck during exam time or review time, I guess we'll call it?
No, I don't think there was. Although I guess fast forward to when I wrote my architecture exams at the university, and there's 4 exams, and I wrote 2, and then we had a break. And the first thing I did a beeline straight for the Migaziagamik, straight to the elder's office, and said, I need to smudge and sit here for a minute. And I think it helped with a recentering. So I did smudge before the first 2 exams, but I needed to re-smudge just to come back from those. Yeah, I think using those types of tools, using our medicines, is something that helps to focus what we're doing.
So we're coming to the end of our hour here. Are there any last questions that anyone would like to ask, either in the chat or if they want to raise their hand and come on video? And if not, then I can also end it with a question or 2 as well. So I guess I'll add to this. Did your university experience, do you think it influenced your thinking about Indigenous or the Indigenous community or about the world in general?
Well, I think it goes back to what I was talking about with regards to the connection to people. You know, having a broad cross-section of the Indigenous experience being present at the university, you know, from urban to rural, north, south, east, west, certainly had an influence on my perception of identities, and in my own identity. So I think it's just, you know, as a critical facilitator for that. I mean, I would also say, and this is maybe not related, but a major influence was having access to Indigenous language at the university. You know, being able to not only engage in, but get credit for Indigenous language. And, you know, I think ever since taking that first intro to Ojibwe class, that thread has also never left me, that desire to learn. to learn my language.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan. I've definitely learned a lot and enjoyed this event, and I hope you did too. Are there any last remarks that you would like to give out at all?
No, I just say miigwech. Thank you for the opportunity. It's always good to connect with some familiar faces and to meet new ones. Yeah, anytime I'm at the university, I always drop in and at the Student Center, and I will continue to do so. Miigwech.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I would like to introduce Karen Richard, Events Coordinator now.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Indigenous Alumni Living Library event. I would like to thank Ryan very much for agreeing to take time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today. And on behalf of the Indigenous Achievement, we are gifting you this beautiful U of M beaded pin that was made by a local artisan, Robin Bully, and also a book by Thomas King, and a magazine, The Briar Patch, the Land Back issue. I will be sending this to you this week coming. And I also want to thank you, Nicole, for doing such a wonderful job interviewing. We also have a gift for you, a U of M bookstore gift card. And this concludes our session, one of the Living Library. Please join us for session 2 with Fauna Kingdom at 11 a.m. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day. Thank you, Ryan.